Before Ayodhya and its grandeur, long before Sita, before the exile and the war that would destroy Lanka, curiosity stirred quietly in the mind of a sage. His name was Valmiki. The Ramayana does not dwell on his origins or spend much time explaining the life that brought him to this moment. Instead, we meet him as an ascetic, immersed in austerity, study, and contemplation. His life anchored in the ancient rhythms of Svadhyaya. One day, Valmiki received a visitor named Narada, a divine sage and traveler between worlds, wise in the affairs of gods and men. He was precisely the sort of person to whom one might ask a question too large for an ordinary answer, and Valmiki had such a question. He wanted to know whether there existed, at that very moment, a person who truly embodied the highest human virtues. Someone strong and wise, steadfast and truthful, guided by dharma, compassionate toward others, disciplined in his conduct, and capable of controlling his anger. He sought someone powerful without arrogance, courageous without cruelty, learned without losing kindness, and formidable when necessary without being governed by violence. Valmiki was not simply assembling a list of virtues with which to praise an imaginary king. His question was more difficult than that. Strength could easily become pride, wisdom did not always bring compassion, and courage could exist alongside cruelty. A man might be truthful yet lack gentleness, while another might be kind but lose his resolve when difficult choices arrived. Valmiki wanted to know whether all these scattered qualities could truly live together in a single human being, not in some distant ideal, but here in the world. Narada listened and acknowledged how rare such a person would be. Yet he knew of one. His name was Rama. Rama, Narada explained, belonged to the ancient lineage of Ikshvaku and was a son of Dasharatha, king of Kosala, whose capital was Ayodhya. He described Rama as disciplined, intelligent, powerful, and self-controlled, a warrior trained in the use of weapons, and a man deeply committed to truth and dharma. He cared for his people, remembered those who had helped him, and guarded his own conduct carefully. His strength was considerable, but his character mattered even more. Narada then began to tell Valmiki the story of Rama's life, and the Ramayana does something unusual at this very beginning. It reveals almost the entire shape of the story. There is little attempt to hide what will happen. Rama is prepared for a coronation, only to lose the kingdom and enter the forest for 14 years because of a promise made by his father. Sita chooses to accompany him, as does his brother Lakshmana. Dasharatha dies in grief, while Bharata refuses to accept the throne that has come to him through his mother's actions and instead waits for Rama to return. The exile leads Rama deeper into the forests, where encounters with sages and rakshasas slowly draw him into conflicts far larger than the circumstances that first brought him there. Eventually, Sita is abducted by Ravana, the powerful ruler of Lanka, and Rama begins the search that will transform the rest of his life. He encounters Hanuman and Sugriva, finds allies among the Vanaras, reaches the southern ocean, and discovers that Sita is being held beyond it in Lanka. Hanuman crosses the sea and finds her. An army eventually follows. A bridge is built across the waters and war consumes Lanka. Ravana falls, Sita is recovered, and after 14 years, Rama finally returns to Ayodhya and becomes king. Narada had given Valmiki the outline of an extraordinary life, but the story was clearly about something deeper than the sequence of its events. The Ramayana does not depend upon our wondering whether Rama will eventually return to Ayodhya or whether Ravana will be defeated. Its deeper question is what happens to virtue when virtue becomes costly. It is easy to speak of duty when duty demands nothing from us, or to value truth when truth carries no consequence. Rama's story would repeatedly place his ideals under pressure, forcing love, loyalty, duty, and personal desire into difficult conflict. Narada had answered Valmiki's question with a name, but only the story itself could reveal what that answer meant. After Narada departed, Valmiki did not immediately begin composing the great poem. Sometime later, he walked with his disciple Bharadwaja toward the river Tamasa. The forest was peaceful, and when they reached the riverbank, Valmiki admired the purity of the water, comparing its clarity to the mind of a good man. It was an ordinary and tranquil moment, far removed from kings, wars, or the great destinies Narada had just described. Then Valmiki noticed a pair of krauñcha birds nearby. They remained close to one another, moving and calling together, absorbed in their companionship. As Valmiki watched, a hunter suddenly released an arrow. It struck the male bird, which fell wounded to the ground. The surviving bird cried out, and the peaceful sounds of the forest were transformed into the lament of a creature suddenly separated from its companion. Valmiki was deeply moved. Compassion mingled with anger as he looked upon what had happened. The birds had threatened no one. They had simply been together, and one life had been abruptly torn from the other. In that moment, words came from him without preparation. Ma nishad pratishtatham tvam agama shashvati sama yat krauñcha mitunad ekam avadhi kama mohitam. It was a condemnation of the hunter who had destroyed the pair, but almost immediately Valmiki realized that something unusual had happened. He had not merely spoken in anger. His words possessed rhythm and measure. They had fallen naturally into balanced parts, capable of being recited and sung. What had arisen from shoka, from sorrow, had become a shloka, a verse. There is something deeply fitting about the way the poetry of the Ramayana is born. It does not arise from victory, celebration, or royal splendor, but from the experience of witnessing another creature's grief. Narada had already told Valmiki of Rama's exile, of Sita's abduction, and of the long separation that would shape their lives. But beside the Tamasa, separation was no longer merely part of a story. Valmiki had heard it as a cry. The poet who would one day give voice to the grief of Rama and Sita first discovered his poetic meter through the sorrow of a bird. Valmiki returned to his hermitage, yet the incident remained with him. His body had left the river bank, but his mind continued to return to the arrow, the falling bird, and the lament of its companion. Most of all, he wondered about the verse that had emerged from him. Why had his sorrow taken that particular form? Why had grief arranged itself into poetry? It was then that Brahma appeared before him. Valmiki rose in astonishment and honored the divine visitor. Yet, the Ramayana gives us a wonderfully human detail. Even with Brahma, the creator, sitting before him, Valmiki's thoughts continued to return to the suffering of the bird. Brahma understood what occupied his mind and assured him that the verse had not arisen without purpose. It was indeed a shloka, and the form that had emerged beside the Tamasa would now become the vessel for something far greater. Brahma instructed Valmiki to compose the life of Rama. He was not merely to repeat the outline Narada had given him, but to know the story in its fullness. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana, the kings and queens, the Rakshasas and the forests, the events witnessed publicly, and the conversations that had taken place in private. What Valmiki already knew would remain with him, and what he did not know would become known. Brahma assured him that what he composed would not be false. Then came a remarkable promise. As long as mountains stood upon the earth and rivers continued to flow, Brahma said, the story of the Ramayana would travel through the world. Its life would not be measured by a dynasty or even by generations, but by the endurance of the earth itself. Thousands of years later, the mountains still stand, the rivers still flow, and the story continues to be told. After Brahma departed, Valmiki prepared himself for meditation. Narada had given him the shape of Rama's life, and Brahma had given him the task of telling it. Now the world of that story began to unfold before him. He saw Dasharatha, Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana. He saw the queens of Ayodhya, the forests, and the kingdoms through which the story would pass. Yet his vision extended beyond the great events. He saw conversations, expressions, and gestures, the private moments between the famous ones, the choices people made, and the consequences that followed. From that vision, Valmiki began to compose the Ramayana. This is why the epic's opening question matters so much. Valmiki did not ask for the story of a man who would never suffer, or of someone whose choices would always be easy. He asked whether a person of extraordinary virtue could exist in this world. And the story that follows will place those virtues under relentless pressure. And so our journey through the Ramayana begins not with Rama's birth, but with the question that first brought his story into the world. Now Valmiki is ready to tell it, and we are ready to follow him. We leave the quiet hermitage, the Tamasa and the krauñcha birds behind, and turn toward Kosala, toward the river Sarayu, and toward the magnificent city of Ayodhya. There, an aging king named Dasharatha possesses wealth, armies, counselors, and a prosperous kingdom. Yet there is one thing even his power cannot command. He has no son. And it is with that longing that the story of Rama truly begins.